Welcome to the Paperless Productivity Podcast, where we have experts give you the insights, know-how, and resources to help you transform your workplace from paper to digital and making your work life better at the same time. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Kevin Legister, your host, and this podcast, Better Claims Processing for Insurance, is the second part of a two-part series where we take the best practices of going paperless to the world of insurance claims. Now, if you haven't listened to the first part of the series, this is going to feel like you're walking into the middle of a movie, and the reason for that is that we took one long conversation and broke it up into two podcast episodes. For those of you who are returning after listening to the first part, recall that we're speaking with Jeff Heegert, who is a senior customer advisor of insurance at Highland Software, and we're taking this concept, the business process framework, and applying it to the world of insurance claims by breaking down each step of the claims process so that we can look at what technology can be used at each step of the way to make the process much more efficient. So let's go ahead and resume this conversation with Jeff.
This evaluate phase, once you get all this information and documentation and they're having to make a whole range of, decisions. And sometimes there can be a lot of documents, that are involved and a lot of different bits and pieces. So when you get to this point where you're starting to talk about this, what are some things that you talk about? What are some ways that maybe with some technology can make that evaluation phase just a little bit easier on the person that has to look at that and make those decisions?
Right. Yeah. And we've kind of mentioned it before, right? A lot of this information and documentation, it doesn't all come in at the same time, and it doesn't all come in from, the same source. So you get information that can be, gathered and it's collected, and it could be stored in a variety of different, systems. If it's a paper document, maybe it's in your content management system. If it's information, maybe it's just stored in your core claims system. If it's a phone call, maybe you've got a system with your phone network that does recordings of your phone interactions with your customers, or maybe it's a video file that's stored in another drive somewhere that you have to open up with a special program, all that kind of thing. And so as an examiner, when you're trying to evaluate, a claim, a lot of times in order to get, a complete view of, not only the policy itself, but all of the information related to a specific claim, it can be a little cumbersome to kind of get all of that together and be able to look at it, in the context of, of the loss that you're evaluating. And so, that's where we look at, solutions for case management, solutions like our WorkView product, where we can sort of, working with our insurance customers, help them build out, for lack of a better word, kind of a claimed workbench, really, that kind of can bring together information and content and data from all these different systems and kind of present it to the claims examiner, in a single, a single place where they can kind of view all of that stuff and get access to information, whether it's stored in, on base, if that's their content management system, or their claims management, their core system like a Guidewire or a Duck Creek, or wherever that information may reside. We have tools that can kind of build out, like I said, a workbench that allows that claims examiner to get access to all of that stuff. So they know they're making a better, more informed decision regarding that particular claim, which which helps the bottom line of the carriers, right? If they're making better decisions in the claims process, that's going to positively affect their loss ratios and overall their combined ratios and make a carrier more profitable.
Yeah, and I was even just thinking about carriers that have, multiple lines. So, for instance, let's suppose that they do individual, group, and then they have, individual life, and then maybe a group life, and then maybe they've sold somebody else's products for a while, and so they may have multiple systems where somebody may have policies, and to be able to pull that information, into kind of a view that says, here's all the policies that, are associated with this individual, here's, their claims, here's all the kind of history, just having all that stuff there, I think would just be such a dream, as opposed to having to go out and search all these different systems. And then you either have 4 screens up on your desk, or you're printing out all kinds of papers just so you can compare everything, together, which could be an incredible challenge.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So you get all these documents together, you've gone through the evaluation phase. It's a claim that you need to work on. But typically speaking, in some very, very simple things, there might not be any interaction, right? I think you mentioned that it might be a straight through process where somebody just looks at it and says, yeah, this is fine. And, we'll cut them a check and we'll consider it done. But, for many other claims, it's usually a little bit more involved than that. There's calls that go back and forth. There's different interactions, and maybe some emails that are coming in. So there's a lot of interaction that sometimes happens or takes place. Maybe you need to get, contact a medical facility for more information, because there's a health claim, health-related claim that comes along with it. What are some ways in terms of, what factors we have to consider, with respect to, how do we track all these different interactions? How do we, as opposed to having 200 sticky notes over, a paper file or all over your desk that you don't eventually get recorded? I mean, how do we put all this together so that somebody can, from a customer service perspective, and I'm thinking of this, when you call in and somebody's working your claim, they're working your claim, and that's great. But the next time you call in, you may not get that person. You might get somebody else. How do they see that information and get that history quickly and be able to document that so it goes into your file? It doesn't just stop there and, somebody scratches down a note on their desk and then nobody ever sees it again. How do you help with that?
Right. Yeah, and in my experience, sometimes in talking with carriers and customers and prospects, managing customer communication sometimes is a second thought. When it comes and they're starting to look for opportunities to either make productivity improvements or to reduce costs or to save expenses. And honestly, that is a huge area where a lot of value can be gained, especially from a compliance standpoint. I don't have the exact metrics in front of me, but I know that when insurance carriers are fined for non-compliance, it's generally because procedurally they either didn't do a particular step within the allotted time period, or when they communicated with a customer, they either used the wrong form or the wrong language in a document provided to the customer. Right? And so those are things that, while complicated, are things that can be avoided with technology. And so when we talk to customers about kind of that interact step of a claim or any process, right, we just want to understand, who are the stakeholders that you communicate with, and what, what are the, what is the messaging that you need to we have technology that can kind of range anywhere from, ad hoc correspondence to full-blown, production, print. Document composition and packaging is an integrated solution in OnBase that allows, the kind of the on-demand dynamic creation of a claim packet. So when the claims examiner is going through the process and they're ready to generate, maybe it's in that initiate and collect phase where they're needing to generate that claim packet that says, hey, here's the information that we need, and here are the forms that are part of your claim submission. Document composition and packaging can use a lot of business logic to know that, it's this policy type, it's in this state, and it's this line of business. Therefore, I know I need to have, these 4 documents, and then basically prepackage those all together and present them to the examiner and give them the ability to resort the order. It dynamically creates a cover page. It ensures that the logo and the closing is all compliant with that particular product and line of business. If there's something where the examiner needs to insert an additional piece of content, they can easily go pull that from OnBase, insert that into the package, and when they're ready, they can generate that package and convert it into a PDF, regardless of what the source file types are. Generate that PDF and then share that out to their consumer through a technology like we talked about before in ShareBase. So really kind of ensure that whatever you're communicating outbound is put together in a compliant manner. So it's not just necessarily compliant, but it's also, hey, this is an interaction with my customer. I want to make sure that, we are putting our brand forward in the most positive light. And we see a lot of carriers that, have outbound correspondence being generated from, multiple sources. The core system is spitting out a monthly bill, and, somebody in, the claims department, is producing out of a Word template, and filling in things. Somebody in customer service has their own template, and a customer can get 3 pieces of correspondence in a month, and they all look different. The logos aren't the same color or the same font size, and they don't have the same look and feel about a piece of correspondence. And that's where a lot of our CCM technology in Content Composer can help. So it can pull all of those things in and make sure that when they go out the door, they have a consistent look and feel from a branding perspective, to make sure that the right logo went on there, that they all have the same, opening and closing, and they all have the same, font type, and you don't have address blocks that are in all caps, because that's how the data got pulled. That's how the data got pulled from the core system, right? You can manipulate that so that the letter, at least when the consumer gets that, it feels as if it was more tailored and specialized to them, and not just spit out of some sort of a data stream. So it's one of those things where, some of our customers, don't give it the attention that I feel it deserves, but, how they interact and communicate with customers and agents and things like that is really an opportunity for them to look at technology to help not only save money by making it compliant and generating in a more efficient manner, but also just from a brand awareness type of perspective, where they can ensure that everything goes out the door with the same look and feel.
Yeah, and that's also one of the ways that you build loyalty as well, right? When you've got that consistent branding and messaging and look and feel, it builds that top of mind awareness. It builds that, that trust, that the customer might have with the insurance company. And, in this day and age where, so many things are just, a tap on your phone away in terms of applying for a policy or taking your business anywhere. Building those relationships is critically important in terms of how you communicate with your customers. So, I think that this definitely, can really, from what I understand what you said, really streamline the process. And so when a customer does get something, it is the right information, it's the correct information that addresses their needs and concerns, and also communicates in a way that, is also compliant, so the compliance guy can sleep at night. And I would assume as well, too, that with these technologies, that when you are creating these correspondences or generating these things, that, they can be automatically put inside the customer file and accessed by anybody that has access to that file, as opposed to, somebody types up a letter in Word and mails it out, and then it's up to that person to manually say, oh, I need to stick this along with the customer file, or, print it off and put, another copy in, the file cabinet type of thing.
Right. Yeah, that's true with all of our solutions regarding customer communication management. Is there is always a digital record of what went out that is stored in the repository and made part of that claim file. So that in your example before, right, if the call center rep takes a call and the customer is saying, hey, I just got this letter and I don't understand what it's telling me, that call center rep, all they have to do is access the claim file, and that letter will be in there, and they can look at it and walk the customer through what it is that they're looking at.
Yeah. This last step, and this has been great to talk about these things, because I think you really touched on some of the stuff that really when it comes to the claims process, aside from maybe the first notice of loss, really there's a lot of things are happening simultaneously. There's some loops in terms of things that are going on, between, maybe agents and customer, those type of things, or the carrier and the customer. You may need, the interact section where you're developing these customer communications. I mean, that might be needed at the beginning, it might be needed at the end, it might be needed in the middle. And this is just, your approach in terms of how you kind of break the process down and then bring technology to these different aspects that can be used really at any point in terms of the process really does, in my mind, just helps it to make so much more sense out of that, and just a much easier way to approach it. So after this is all done, we've collected information, we've communicated with the customer, we've made evaluations. There's some sort of, at the end, there's some sort of closing out process, right, where we execute on the final decisions. And that might be, the claim needs to be paid in full, paid partial because you need to make an adjustment, or not paid at all because of, some circumstance, whatever, that, it's a non-covered event. And that usually involves a lot of different steps and pieces too. Not only communicating with the customer, there's maybe a core system that needs to be looked at. There's things that happen, maybe accounting. Walk us through that. I mean, what could this look like in a future world where maybe they've taken down the steps and looked at some of these technological solutions?
Right. Yeah, and you're right. And really, that core claims management system has been in play, all along from the time the first notice of loss was submitted, right? But in many cases, those core systems that, if they're an older system, they may not have much in the way of any workflow or task management, type of capabilities in it. And so in many cases, workflow and case management features and functionality and OnBase are kind of used to kind of drive the claim through its steps until it gets ready to be settled. And other, the more modern platforms like a Guidewire or a Duck Creek, they have technology built in there where they can, manage a lot of the tasks that are required in processing a claim. And so what we like to do is we are by no means going to replace a core claims management system, but what we want to do is wrap functionality around those systems and fill in whatever gaps they may have. And we have done a lot of work with Guidewire and Duck Creek. They are both technology partners of ours. We are the only ECM vendor that's on the Guidewire's solution partner program, and we've worked closely with them to build out accelerators that basically contain a lot of pre-built, pre-tested, pre-validated integration code that allows systems like OnBase to ride right alongside with systems like Guidewire. So, for example, when a document is captured in OnBase and we classify that as a part of this claim, right, we can have pre-built rules that kick off a task in Guidewire so that the claims examiner is made aware that, okay, this document was received and here are the things that you need to do with it. Mm-hmm. Or conversely, if the examiner is working in a back-end system like a Guidewire or Duck Creek and they perform some sort of transaction in that system, whether that's updating a keyword or updating, a status or something like that, through that pre-built integration, that information can also be updated and made available within OnBase. Yeah. So it's really, from that execute phase, it's really about how can we reduce and eliminate situations where someone has to take information from one system and then go update it in another place, right? And so you have information that may be stored in both places that isn't in sync. And so from an execute standpoint, we really look at integrating with those core systems to make it easy and keep all the data in sync. And then also, we've got some reporting capabilities, right, with our reporting dashboards and things like that, because ultimately, throughout the process and once you're done, you're going to want to look back and do some measurements in terms of, how long did it take us to get from initiate to execute, and how long did it take in between each of those steps, and, how many did Susan do and how many did John do, and did they do them correctly, and were they done within the SLAs, and, all those types of things. So really, from the execute phase, we also kind of look at, how do we go back and do analytics and reporting on that overall process. So that's a huge feature functionality that we see our insurance customers using quite a bit as well.
So that's one of the things that, as you were talking about the reporting dashboards, I think it's so cool because they can take a look and see, how much do we have that, is under consideration for claims? What does my queue look like? What bottlenecks do I have in the system? Where are claims being, even from a geographic perspective, right? Where are they coming from? There's a whole range of things, I think, with reporting dashboards that really makes it cool But even as you go through the execution phase, that you can really begin to get a snapshot of your business.
Mm-hmm.
So Jeff, we've kind of run the gamut here from initiate to collect to evaluate to interact to execute. So now that we've kind of got this business process framework, that we just unpacked and we kind of wrapped our arms around it. How we can address the entire claims process with this. Why is it so key for insurers, to really to take this approach and solve their claims challenge this way?
Well, I think it really sort of forces them to take a holistic approach, right? And while they may not need to make corrections or solve problems in all 5 of the steps, right? It's important to understand how those 5 steps are connected and how they each impact the next one. Far too many times we've seen, where a company might go in and try to solve a problem in the interact phase, and they'll go off and they'll buy an off-the-shelf kind of do-it-yourself customer communication management thing, and they'll drop it in and they'll start creating all of these templates and whatnot, and they'll do it kind of in a vacuum, not really understanding the initiate and the collect and the evaluate steps that have led up to the need to generate something, and they'll find that while they may have improved one step in the process, they've kind of slowed the whole thing down overall. Yeah. So like I said, it's not necessary that you've got to solve all the problems at once, right? But kind of breaking the process down into those 5 steps, understand how they are connected, how they feed one another, and how they rely on the previous step to perform certain functions is really a smart way to go about it. Because then when you do go in and solve issues or challenges that may reside in one of those 5 steps, you can do it knowing that you're either going to help support the later steps and not break anything downstream. So that's another value of looking at it this way. It helps you to focus on the what it is that you're doing and not necessarily how.
Sure.
But kind of fixing the what you're doing, and then building the how around with technology.
Yeah, I just even think too from an IT perspective, when you have stuff inside, OnBase, for instance, where maybe you're not solving all the points up front, but maybe just 2 or 3 or just one of them, that when you get to the next phase and you start to look at that, you have a foundation that you can build on. You have a knowledge base that you can build on. Whereas if you're going to introduce all new technology to that really then means that you have to acquire a whole other set of knowledge, a set of facts, a set of information to be able to take things in the next step, the next phase, and so that also makes a process longer as opposed to quicker. And there's always that challenge of there's functionality available in one, it's not available in the other, and
right.
it just creates all kinds of challenges that way when you're patching pieces together, as opposed to something that really can walk it through from front to back. So Jeff, this has been yeah. So this has been very insightful, Jeff, and I think a discussion maybe around other business processes in insurance might be great to have in the future. And for our listeners, if you are interested in insurance solutions, you can go to imagesoftinc.com/insurance. That's imagesoftinc.com/insurance.
Thanks again for joining us on this podcast. And if you haven't already done so, be sure to subscribe to Paperless Productivity, where we tackle some of the biggest paper-based pain points facing organizations today. We'll see you next time.